my wife said, "You think anybody ever asks Steve Jobs to go to lunch?" I don't know. So I tried it. And so he and I had lunch a number of times, a dozen or so. And one time he told me he hopes that he'll be reincarnated as a Pixar director. So that was interesting.
Your movie Up was the first time where I felt extreme emotion in an animated movie. Like, I wasn't an animated movie person before that.
No, really?
And then that movie broke me.
We turned you.
You turned me.
Oh, cool.
So the idea, did you have the kernel of the idea of the house flying away?
Yeah, I think, if I remember, it was a long time ago, I had the kind of concept of, and this really came out of Monsters Incorporated, the first film I directed. I know nobody told me, if they told you, as a director, you don't actually do anything. You walk around and talk to people all day.
Right.
And that's...
I describe it sometimes as a camp counselor.
Yeah, and that was overwhelming. Yeah. So I literally would, at the end of the day, hide under my desk. I have, to this day, a stack of books about people marooned on tropical islands. So that was what I was driven by, just like, I just want to get away from everything. Let's just float the house away. Yeah. And then from there came all the hard work after that.
Right. So the ending of Up was a dream come true for you in a fantastical way.
Yeah,
what if I just got away?
Because, of course, the answer is that would be awful. And what you need is community and connection with other people.
Right.
And that's what the movie's about.
That's what the movie's about. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. So my experience of it was, the first 10 minutes were, I think first 10 minutes is when that prologue happens.
Yeah.
It's very, very emotional, really like sucker punched me in this way that I did not see coming. And then here's what I'll say about it. Oddly, I think part of it is that it's people in the animation as opposed to animals,
robots,
fish, robots. And I think, like, was that a choice? Because I feel like in animation, the conventional wisdom is like, we're going to do things that you can't do in live action film.
I have wondered, like, if you made a shot-by-shot remake of Up with real people, would you get away with it? I mean, for one, I think you'd be like, really, house flying, whatever. But more than that, I wonder if some of the stuff that was sort of appealing and likable for a grouchy old man to do in an animated film would actually be like, ugh, I hate him. In live action, I don't know.
Right.
That's the
Jack
magic
Nicholson
of casting.
in As Good as It Gets or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
First of all, do you think you'll make a live action movie at some point?
Probably not. Well, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? See, I'm super nervous to be on this podcast because I'm worried that you're going to ask me a lightning round of questions.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to go down. It's going to not be.
I'm going to hit you hard.
What happens under pressure is that I get dumber and my wife gets smarter. And that's why it's just not fair. But that's why I'm in animation, because I can be under pressure and be like, let's think about this tomorrow.
No, totally. I mean, I met you close to 15 years ago when Sleepwalk With Me went to Sundance, and then our film was invited to screen at the Steve Jobs Cinema.
Oh, yes, the theater.
Yeah,
the
theater on your campus, which we couldn't believe. We were just like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is better than getting into Sundance. And then, but I sought you out because I was just like, I need to meet the person who made Up, and because it was so astonishing to me. And then we met and we became friends. And then over the years, you've given me an extraordinary amount of notes on my shows.
Uh-oh. Is that a good thing?
No, they're great. They're like some of the best. Well, because you're friends with me and also my director, Seth Barrish, who's directed all 6 of my shows. The one that's most notable, because I think it really improved the show, is on The Old Man in the Pool. We did it at the Berkeley Repertory Theater. Mm-hmm. And afterwards, you were like, that was great. And then Seth took you aside and was like, how do you really feel? And I forget what Seth and I have various tricks for squeezing notes out of people that are critical, that they're withholding.
Right.
By being polite.
Yes.
I don't remember what he said, but you said this thing that was really smart, because at the end of the show, I basically say, like, all we have is this moment, and what I want to tell my parents is, and then it cuts to black.
Oh yeah.
And you had this note, which was you're ending with a thought and you're not ending on an action.
Oh, right.
So we're like, okay, well, what if we landed that action in the locker room? I go back to the YMCA. I see an old man, naked old man massaging his testicles. What about that? And then I have that thought.
Yeah.
I think it made the show 10% better, which, as
Wow.
you know, is a lot. But the reason I bring it up is you give a lot of notes, you get a lot of notes. What's a good note look like? And what does a bad note look like?
Well, I still think a lot about Seth's advice in his book, which is don't tell people you like this or you don't like this. Tell them the way it made you feel.
Yes.
And so often people are like, oh, I didn't mean for you to be focused on that. You know, just telling people, here is my internal reaction to what you showed me is so clarifying.
Yes. So do you lead with that? Like when you show, like Pixar has a really unique approach to workshopping things, which is you'll be able to explain this better, but it's like you do a rough draft, maybe, of the movie.
Yeah, we call it storyboards,
Right.
story reels.
So when you were doing Leo, which is the movie that comes out
Yep.
this summer, how many drafts do you show people along the way before it's the final draft that people see in cinema?
Well, okay, it depends on what you count as a draft. So we start with a treatment, and then we have scripts, a bunch of versions of the scripts, and then we put everything up almost like comic book form with our own music, dialogue, sound effects. We did that on Elio is like 10 times.
10 times?
Yeah.
You show
And
everybody at
not-
Pixar?
We try to save some people so that they're raw,
Right,
so they
right.
can see it for the first time and give an honest first-timer opinion.
Yeah, I do that with my shows too.
Okay, yeah.
We're always like, okay, well, we'll
Who's
save
left?
this person.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
person hasn't seen it.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
you know, it's like half the time you show it to somebody and you're like, don't say anything. I already know it's wrong. Seeing it through your eyes, I already have some ideas on what didn't work and
That's
what we need to
right.
change. So there's that. And then there's usually the note session afterwards, which sometimes is better than other times. I mean, you always get good stuff. Sometimes it's demoralizing. You don't seem to get demoralized, though.
Are you kidding me?
You just rally right back.
Are you kidding me?
People are laughing behind me.
Get the fuck out of my studio. No, I'm completely demoralized all the time.
Are you?
All the time.
Oh, well,
That's outrageous.
That makes me feel better.
Well,
Not really, but I mean, this is what happens for me is like Joe Grant was this guy I got to know. He was the head of story on Dumbo.
okay.
So when I knew him, he was in his 90s. So he said, yeah, everything is brilliant until you have to tell it to somebody else. And I'm like, that is absolutely true.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's building up to the screening, and you're like, this is going to kill. This is going to get us, everyone's going to lift us on their shoulders.
They'll love us forever.
And then they're like, well, I have some notes. And that's not what you want to hear. And then for me, I usually give myself a day to just wallow in my own self-pity.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens anyway.
Yeah.
And then after that, you start to go like, well, what if we did do that? And then you start to get excited again.
Well, it's funny. I asked one of your collaborators on Up, Tom McCarthy, I go, Pete Docter's coming. I'm interviewing. Do you have any questions? He goes, I have so many. I go, name one. He goes, does he like me? Which means to me that you are mysterious, even to your close friends.
That's hilarious.
Do you ever have feedback where people feel like they have to read you based other than what you're saying?
I'm the wrong person to ask. But the way I try to do it is, here's the way it made me feel, here's a suggestion, and then, this is crucial, here's why. Because what I'm trying to solve with this is blankety, blankety, blank.
Right.
And so if you have something like this lame suggestion that I just gave you, at least then they don't have to take my suggestion, but they know what they're trying to solve for.
Can you give an example of the why?
A lot of times I'll say, hey, what would be funny or what would solve this problem for me is if this character got in the car and drove away.
Yeah.
And that would tell me he doesn't care. And it doesn't mean that you have to get him literally into a car, but what I'm looking for is a sense that he doesn't care. He's just going away.
So in other words, I think you're saying like it's the note under the note. It's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
something there. That's how Seth and I always like talk about it is like we'll get feedback from people, and if a bunch of people give notes in a section, that section's not working.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that they're, because a lot of people come in hot with their notes.
Oh, yeah?
They'll go, no, what has to happen here is that this character, uncle, has to die. You go, no. I don't know if the uncle has to die, but something in that area is clearly not working for you.
Yeah. And have you heard, have you probably experienced this too, where the area people poke at, sometimes the problem is actually before that.
Oh, that's interesting.
That we haven't set it up right, or we haven't gotten to this. The actual thing is okay, the thing that's happening, but we haven't.
I feel like maybe that's almost always true.
Yeah, it seems like.
What do you think is the hardest part of the movie? The beginning, the middle, and the end?
All of them. The beginning is hard because if you don't hook people in the beginning, you never get. It's not like I hate this character, but in the middle I decided I love him. That never happens, right? You just they turn it off. They move on. So you gotta get them at the beginning.
Yeah.
In fact, Elio, that's we redid the beginning. We had animated the whole thing. And we redid the beginning because we realized we're just not connecting with this character. And this is something I'm curious about in your process too. Typically, we think, what we need is more jokes. We need more funny.
Right.
That'll get them. And then what actually works, not just on Elio, but on a lot of films, is empathy and vulnerability. Yeah. Showing the character's deep wound or hurt is usually the way the audience goes, oh, well, now I feel bad for him, and now I'm invested in their story.
Yeah, that was a big note that 6 months before The Good Life came out, Ira Glass listened to a version of the show, audio from the road, and he goes, it's really good. You just need 3 or 4 more moments where you tell the audience something that's true and not funny. Mm-hmm. And it's such a simple note, but it's hard to do that.
Well, I keep coming back to your line, which is, before I tell you this next part, remember, you're on my side.
You're on my side.
And that's really what we're trying to do.
Right. That's the whole trick of filmmaking is you're how do we get people on our side for a thing that's essentially compromising of that character.
Well, here's the thing, the act one is hard because we have to set up a character that you like, but that is flawed enough that when we fix them, we're going to be like, good, I like this character better. So they have these awful habits or whatever.
That's right.
Way of looking at the world, and yet somehow we have to make it likable.
You have to fix them enough that it's worth watching a movie for it.
Yeah, it's true.
Which is wild.
Yet you don't hate them and turn it off.
Okay, so to go back to the notes thing, what's your favorite kind of note to get from someone?
I loved it. Perfect. No, I mean, that's what you want, right?
Yeah, of course.
My favorite kind of note.
But it's weirdly not. It's interesting. I read, I'm forgetting the guy's name who wrote the book, but he was one of the co-founders of Pixar who wrote that book, Creativity Inc.
Oh, Ed, yeah. Captain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he has this really, I think, astute point that I feel like since I read the book, I've repeated 100 times, which is that when people think of Pixar, they think that there was a formula that was created for making movies, and he's like, no, the opposite. It's every movie is a series of problems and challenges, and if it didn't have those challenges, it actually wouldn't be the movie you love. And I think that that's a great way of looking at it.
Right, and that's the same as people, right? If you didn't make these horrible mistakes in your life, you wouldn't be who you are today.
Right.
So, I mean, every movie, I'm laughing as you said, because we just had a post-mortem on the last movie, and we do that almost every film.
On Elio or the movie before
Elio.
that? Okay.
So we look at it and go all right, what did we do on that movie that we never want to do again? What do we do? What do we learn? And I keep thinking in the back of my head, it's always going to be broken. There's always going to be problems.
Yes.
I mean, I guess the wisdom is let's learn from this so we don't make that mistake. We can make new mistakes next time.
But it's oddly comforting to think of it that way.
Yeah.
It makes you not maybe want to hide under your desk. Yeah,
I mean, I did have an idea that somewhere out there was the perfect director, and that's what I wanted to become. And then at some point you realize, no. The person who loves director A hates director B, and vice versa. Someone else might hate director B and love director A because of the match, the creative match. That's always a mess.
Wait, so in other words, you were thinking how do I become the perfect director?
I want to be the director that everybody loves, that does great movies,
right,
that knows how to speak with people, and I don't think there's such a thing.
Right.
I mean, working with actors, there's some actors who want to talk and analyze everything. There's some who are don't say anything. I'm just going to do this.
Right.
I want to be instinctive. So everybody's different.
how do you, I mean, we were figuring this out today. Gary was pointing out that like in a film, it's like hundreds of thousands of frames. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how do you bring energy to that day after day after day, year after year? Where's the spark?
Yeah, right. And it literally is made one frame at a time.
Yeah.
A good animator can do like 4 seconds in a week. That's the speed at which we go.
Absurd.
I know.
4 seconds in a week. And you have to wake up at 7 a.m. and be like, I'm going to go to work today to work on our section of the 4 seconds.
It's absurd. And that's the animator. That's not counting the person who did all the sim, the cloth, or the background characters, or the lighting,
right,
or the textures. So it's absurdly slow. But
what's the part, you're talking about like all the different roles. I was thinking about like how AI interacts with animation right now. It's like, well, AI could technically do half the departments.
Yeah, but
it might not be as
would
good.
look like? It would be like, look like that. It would be bizarre.
Right. But it's like, which at some point.
Yeah, it will.
For sure. Because even like when they presented the idea of computer graphics at all in the 70s, people were like, that's crazy. It can only be human beings drawing it, right?
Yeah.
So eventually they're going to be like, well, AI can do the lighting, or AI can do the costumes, or AI can do blah, blah, blah. But it's like, what is your thing where you're like, no, this part has to be human beings?
Well, okay, so I was thinking about this. We were watching Elio, and I was realizing we have 150 animators, and I would say, I get myself in trouble if I try to give a percentage of them that are really brilliant. If you look back in time, the number of hand-drawn animators that were really brilliant was in the dozens.
Yeah.
Like a very small number of people who could draw well enough, understood the dynamic of movement, character acting, had the right sensibilities. That's like, the Disney's 9 Old Men and a few others.
Yeah.
So not very many.
Right.
But I think computers have
when you say the 9 Old Men, it's like they're essentially like 9 guys who made all of those movies for like decades.
Frank Thomas, Ollie Johnson, Milt Kahl, all these great animators from the days of yore. I think computers rather have made animation more accessible. So I don't have to be a brilliant draftsperson to be an animator. I still have to have performance and timing, but like one of the heavy lifts has been done by the computer. And maybe there's some other tax with that. Like I have to understand how the system works and, but I was wondering whether AI will continue to help us lift some of the heavy burdens that we have to carry as an animator and maybe put the focus more on the performance.
Right.
Everything I've seen with AI, at least so far, it looks like you took everything, shook it all up, gave me the average and sanded the edges off. Right. You know what I mean? It feels kind of bland, or like, that's sort of what a bear looks like,
Sure.
But not any specific bear or a person, and I don't know if that'll change too, but AI seems like it is the least impressive blah average of things.
At some point, the people who are above you, which I don't even, what are there, 2, 3, 1? How many people?
There's a lot.
But at some point there'll be pressure. They'll go like, we could do a movie for free. We could do a Pixar style movie, except it's free.
Yeah. No, there's already been pressure. I guess the way I look at it, I don't think AI is going to be like, make, film, enter. It's not going to do that. That's why I think everybody's very troubled with it right now, because you're like, well, I don't want to help create the technology that will take over what I do, but it is being trained on everything, right?
Yeah.
AI it's listening to everything you've ever performed and written, and
I know.
And
and it's laughing and and it's experiencing human emotions.
It probably is.
What's funny is there was we were doing research here the other day on history of Pixar stuff, and there was that like long thread on Twitter that went viral about how to make a Pixar story. And then I
didn't see that.
Oh, okay. You didn't see it. I mentioned it to Seth.
What's the answer? How do we do it?
No, I mentioned it to Seth, and he goes, I asked Pete about it once, and he goes, that wasn't us. We didn't do that.
Right. Yeah, I think there is something slightly dangerous about analyzing yourself.
Yeah.
Because then and I've seen a few people do this where they put together talks and package it for easy to understand audience, and then they're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, at every phase, not every phase, at every film I've worked on, there comes a phase where all the tricks have run out.
Yeah.
I've tried everything and it still didn't work. And then you do something else and that's what solves it. You know what I mean? It's just, I think that's an essential part of the creative process, that you're discovering this thing. If you knew exactly what you wanted from the beginning, for one, I don't think it would be very good, but it wouldn't be very interesting.
The thing that I didn't understand about animation until I read that book that we're talking about, Creativity Inc., is this idea of like in the 70s that they created the idea of motion blur.
Oh yeah.
And then that made it like feel more like what human beings look like, because drawings are essentially all in focus.
Yeah.
And human motion is out of focus to the human eye.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like this breakthrough of like, oh my God, cartoons feel like life a little bit.
Yeah, and that's why it's weird when you see AI pictures and that it puts motion blur in sometimes.
Right.
Like, oh, it's doing it. But yeah, it's early stop motion, like Willis O'Brien or some of the guys who did like King Kong. Can't believe I'm blocking on Harryhausen, Ray Harryhausen. A lot of those are kind of jittery because they didn't know how to blur fast movement.
Right.
Know? Yeah.
And then Pixar came along in the 90s and essentially created the first computer created animation films, right? I mean, that's sort of the innovation.
I don't know that I could credit Pixar for that. I think there were other people who were also doing early computer work, but I guess Pixar foundationally has the first feature length animated film with computer.
Right.
Toy Story.
Toy Story.
Yeah.
Which you worked on.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. That was
it's unbelievable. Ago. You won the Oscar?
No, we got a special Oscar.
Oh, okay.
That John, I think.
Oh, right,
John,
because it predated.
We didn't have
the
animation
category. Right. Oh, there was a special Oscar.
And we were very flattered to be nominated. This was almost more meaningful. Nominated in the screenplay category.
Oh, that's really cool.
So yeah, and it felt kind of mysterious because we were all going like, I don't know how this works. This clickety, you know. And Andrew Stanton, I remember getting email from him with, I could barely make it out, typos and spelling errors. And somehow along the way, he just like, I'm figuring this out. And then he put his glasses on and figured it out.
Which part of it? What do you mean?
Just the writing process. During Toy Story, I watched him go from like, I'm just a cartoonist to a writer.
Oh, interesting.
And he would come in with stacks of books about the process. We went to Bob McKee's story structure thing.
Oh my God. So you're saying before Toy Story, you didn't think about, you weren't going to make a feature film. You were just going to animate shorts. And so then you started to think about, okay, what would the structure of a feature length look like?
Yeah, I mean, all of us who were involved there was only one that had worked on a feature, really. I mean, John Lasseter, who's the director, he had animated on a feature. He animated on Fox and the Hound. You guys watch that one?
Yep.
Andrew and I had only done shorts. Joe Rampt, who was our head of story, had actually worked on a story in the story department before. He worked on Rescuers Down Under. But he was also head of story on James and the Giant Peach and Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh wow!
So he had the most experience by a long shot of any of us.
Wow.
And he would just say stuff like, trust the process, and be like, huh? What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
And also there kind of is no process that predates it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Steve Jobs would pop in and do Punch Up.
Yeah, exactly. No, Steve we barely saw during the making of it. I remember the first time I met him was like 3 months into working there. He showed up to basically let go of the hardware division.
Okay.
And so it was a downer moment, but I got a peek into what they called the reality distortion field that he would create. He was like, we've got a great future. And everybody left going, hey, this is great. We just fired all my friends.
Oh my God.
So that was wild. But then he didn't really show up most of the way through. And then at the end, he was very heavily involved in how we were going to roll this out to the world. He had a lot of opinions about the marketing campaign and advertising and things like that.
What was his take on it? Do you recall?
Well, it's very classic Steve. You know, a lot of times animation, and we're guilty of this too, is like, just put tons of colors on it and put all the characters in there. And he was like, you can only communicate one thing, strip it down, keep it simple, keep it elegant. He had a lot kind of push in that direction. But I think Steve, we would hear stories of him at Apple, and then he would come to Pixar, and everyone would kind of back up. And he was pretty gentle. And I remember my wife said, "You think anybody ever asks Steve Jobs to go to lunch?" I don't know. So I tried it. And so he and I had lunch a number of times, a dozen or so. And one time he told me he hopes that he'll be reincarnated as a Pixar director. So that was interesting.
I mean, that's outrageous. It is, but it is like a dream job. Like, I really do think, like, if you're growing up and you're a creative kid, you think the dream job would be, I'm a director at Pixar. So, like, how is that true? How is it not true?
Well, I was going to say, you should talk to some of the Pixar directors
yeah.
and hear especially the first time through. Because what happens is, it almost feels like it's engineered to find your weak spots and pick at them.
Say more about that.
Well, like if you have trouble making decisions, the whole process is about decisions. Oh, right. Boy, okay, that's awful. If you feel insecure, the whole process is going to make you feel more insecure.
Right.
If you're a private person, we're going to probe in because the story itself is going to expose all the things you don't want to talk about in yourself. So it's I watch it every time, and I warn new directors coming in. It's like, just so you know, this isn't intentional, but this process is going to expose your weak underbelly for everybody, and we're all going to be talking about it. So you just have to be comfortable with that.
We're all going to be talking about it.
It's true.
I think that really drives the knife in.
It's true.
We're all going to be talking about it over lunch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for like supporting someone's vision, but also being honest?
I think I'm generally guilty of being too nice, of saying, no, it's great, like you were talking about with Seth at the beginning. And so I think the other extreme is giving people 8,000 disparate notes.
Yeah.
So what I try to do when people ask me to assess something is first I make all the notes, and then I go, well, there's 3 things. If I really back up, there's 3 things. And you can't really have more than 3 things.
Right. What's the worst reaction you've ever gotten to someone giving notes?
There was one time that, and it wasn't just me, but we gave notes and the director walked out and got in his car and drove home and said, I don't think I'm ever coming back.
Did he come back?
He did, yes. He did. But
that's a hard day.
That was a hard day.
Wow. This is one of the great things about animation is it opens up the scope of what a story can be about. Do you ever find that a more daunting way to create since there are no limitations to what you're making?
Yeah. I think, so often our problem in the first draft is there's just too many ideas. And you have to pare it down and just simplify.
Right.
And you realize, this is only an hour and a half. That seems like a long time.
Right. It's like the characters could fly.
Yeah.
They could be astronauts. They could swim.
Well,
1,000 miles if they wanted to.
Certain concepts lend themselves to more pitfalls than others.
Yeah.
Like if you have a grouchy old man, I guess the thing that some people felt like, I remember Dan Gerson, who is a writer that I worked with on Monsters, he saw it and he said, the dogs flying airplanes, ooh, you lost me. That just you went too far.
That's the thing.
That went over the line. So, but my point was, you have a human in more or less our world that there's restrictions, right?
Right.
You're gonna, I guess the farthest we're gonna go is like the floating house with balloons. But there are other things going into space or fantasy worlds of some sort that you're right. You can just go blah, 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 off in any direction, and that's bad.
Is one of the like when I think about your movies, it's like the world of Inside Out, for example. It's like, do you have to come up with what are the rules of this parallel universe that doesn't exist, but for us it exists?
Yeah.
Like, what are the rules of Inside Out?
Well, we started with I don't know if I can even answer that. It was something that evolved with the story. And sometimes the rules would be the rules until we realized, well, that can't be the rule anymore. We have to change it.
Right.
They have to be able to do this or that. And then you have to go backwards and be consistent with that. You know, you can't just change your mind in the middle of a story. You can if you're making the story, as long as it's consistent.
But that must be crazy because there's 100 people working on the movie or more, right?
Yeah.
How many people working on one of those movies? 300?
Yeah, 300 usually.
Right. So it's like, then you have to be like, hey, memo for everybody. Actually, these characters can fly now.
That is part of the director's job, is to go around like, I know last week I said this is not supposed to have a, well, now it is. And not, lose too much people's faith.
That is such a hard job, though, to direct a movie like that. That's 300 people you have to convince of a world that does not exist all the time and changes.
It's a little bit like a military structure. You have the director, then you have all these heads of each department, and if you communicate to them about certain things, they can disseminate. That's how you pronounce it. The information to people. So that makes it a little bit. I mean, we have an amazing crew of people.
Do you ever punch out of a film that you conceived of that you'd put in years and years on?
No, I think there were one or two that I worked on for months and months. Wall-E was one that I had tried to get in to process like twice, and it didn't go. And Andrew picked it up, and I was like, if you can get it to go, great.
Like, in other words, get it to go, get it to work, or get it
into production.
Greenlit.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he did?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, we had come up with some of the stuff of, this robot on a planet full of trash, and but he was the one that really cracked it. So
when you're working on like we're talking,
and obviously he directed it and wrote it and everything else. Right. I just did the very early stuff, which is a little bit like, as Bob McKee says, whistling on the steps of Carnegie Hall. Like, it's easy to have ideas,
right? But
to actually get the thing to go and make people care, and that's the hard part. That's what Pixar's been sued quite often, especially the more popular films, for whatever reason.
Sure,
they get a lot of lawsuits.
Sure.
So I think it always makes me upset because we didn't steal anything. Even if we had, it's not the idea. It's the execution of it. It's the 5 years you spent figuring out how to put that across.
Right.
That's the hard work.
Oh, yeah. No, I can only imagine. Because, of course, that's, that stand-up comedy is a similar thing. It's the illusion of, that's something I was thinking the other day.
Yeah.
And it's like, right, but you didn't, you weren't able to whittle it down to 7 words in a row in front of an audience.
And you didn't devote your life to standing in front of a crowd and listening to the show every day afterward, and all the work that,
Right, that's the magic trick of stand-up comedy, and I suppose that's the magic of filmmaking as well.
Yeah. Did we talk about this?
There
was a great, Penn and Teller. Penn wrote something, and I think it was Smithsonian. He said, "You will be fooled by a trick if it involves more work and effort than any sane person would be willing to invest."
Yeah.
And that's the same with what we do.
That's right. That's such a great way of looking at it. Right. You have to invest an extraordinary amount of time. Like when you were working on, because that's the first film from Pixar in the 90s is Toy Story. When you're working on that, did you feel like, this is going to be what takes over?
No, I totally... Well, for one, I don't know that I ever really stopped and thought, will this be successful or not?
Sure.
I was just like, this is fun. Let's keep going. And then once it came out, I remember we had the... press would always ask, how long do you predict before real actors are replaced by computer-generated ones?
Gosh.
That was their big fear then. And is this going to replace hand-drawn? And we said never to both, and we were sort of wrong on one. I mean, hand-drawn, there's still hand-drawn animation, but not at the same sort of scale and finesse that there was at Disney back in the day. It's now CG, so... But I had no idea. I guess you're asking.
What do you think could be the thing that's next after this? So it's like motion blur was in the 70s, and then it's like essentially like films on computers in the 90s, and then it's like, what is the next thing that might happen?
Well, Mike, if I knew that, I wouldn't give it away free on your podcast. I have no idea.
Do you have any hint of it? Do you think that like I guess what I'm thinking of is like people always make a strong case for VR, and I'm always like, I believe you. You know, some people, you know what I mean? Like, I believe you, but I'm not there on it.
No, I know. And every time you try, they're like, yeah, put these glasses on, and it starts getting a bruise on your nose, and then
right.
And you're sweating under there, and you're like, this isn't really fun, and I can't see the person who's sitting next to me anymore. So
totally,
I don't know.
Takes away the fun of it.
Yeah.
Do you read like futurism writing and things like that about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that seems like depressingly already happening is that when people are walking around on their phones, they are in a virtual world already.
That's right.
They're walking around, so they're amongst us, but not really.
Right.
And that seems like it's not going to go away because it's very tempting. It's pleasurable somehow to get texts from people, and
right.
I don't know why that
is.
It's
hitting our dopamine centers and doing something to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know what's going to happen in terms of storytelling or filmmaking or stuff. I don't know. I mean, it's such a weird cross-section of, the financial situation and technology and sociology. And I got to believe that, so far as we can tell, people from caveman days when they could first talk were sitting around fires telling stories.
That's right.
I doubt that's going to change in the next 2 years. Because that's a couple million years worth of.
Yeah, I don't think that's changing.
Worth of road.
That's my case always for film.
Yeah, how it is going to manifest, I don't know. It might be on some other device. But I do think there's also something people, even though there's more streaming than ever, there is something people crave or find reward in sharing that with other people, don't you think?
Right. Oh yeah.
I mean, for you especially, you can't have a comedian with a one-person audience. Even when they're watching at home, you sense the audience. That's why you're there, right?
No, absolutely. And I think like live stand-up comedy is bigger than it's ever been right now.
Maybe because people aren't going to movies as much, but they still crave the
being in a group
connective.
and laughing in a group. Yeah, there's certainly something to it. The thing that I was always confused by with Pixar in relationship to Disney was when Pixar came out, I was like, it's like punk rock to what Disney I would describe as like rock and roll. And what is your relationship to both? And then when they became one or one became a subset of the other, how'd you feel about it?
Yeah. Okay. So when I got the call that we were going to be bought by Disney, guess where I was? I was standing on the riverboat at Disneyland.
Disneyland, sure.
So
there you go.
It all sort of fits. And I was, part of me was like, oh, that's exciting and troubling at the same time. Because I was
with your kids?
Yeah, they were there. I was immediately thinking, that means we have access to the archives. We can go look at all the drawings that all the great animators did.
Yeah.
That was my first thought. Not anything really business-wise. I think Steve Jobs, he knew that he was dying of cancer.
Right.
He wanted the place to be cared for, and he did consider a long time the idea that could we be our own thing. But I guess his thought was that we'd be so sink or swim, every film would be success or failure, that it just felt too dangerous, even for a guy willing to take pretty big risks.
Yeah.
So tethering to Disney, you're going to stay afloat.
What would your biggest piece of advice be for a young teenager who wants to be an animator right now?
Do it.
Do it.
Do it. It's easier than ever. The other thing I've said, like, you would never think of handing someone who's never played before a violin and saying, you have natural talent. You're playing on Carnegie Hall tonight. Like, it takes years to practice and get better.
Right.
Filmmaking is no different. It's not like some people are born with talent and some people aren't. I mean, that's true to some degree.
Right.
But you need, either way, you're going to need to practice.
Right.
So
what do you think is the calibration of hard work and talent that makes the best animators?
I don't know. It's almost impossible to answer because I know, and okay, my mom is moving out of her house, and we had looking through old stuff, and I have drawings of my own, and they're like, oof, I did not have an innate talent as a kid.
Yeah.
It was clunky, but for whatever reason, I had the enthusiasm, and I stuck with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the proportion of that is, if it's just blind optimism, or I mean, obviously talent does get external reward from people. They're like, ooh, that's a good drawing, and then you are enthusiastic and keep going.
What is the thing that, because I have to imagine that on these films through the years, you're sometimes working 15, 16-hour days.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what's the thing when you're working on a movie 2, 3 in the morning that's making you go, we have to do this?
I don't know. What's the thing for you? You just feel like you have to do it.
I'll come on your podcast and answer it.
All right. I don't know. You just feel like it has to be good. It has to be good.
Right.
How many, Brad Bird said, pain is temporary, film is forever.
So great.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is the slow round.
Okay, slow round.
Who are you jealous of?
I'm jealous of Bill Watterson, the guy who did Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh, wow.
Who drew that, said, I'm retiring, and disappeared from society.
Is that what he did?
I mean, nobody really knows where he is because he just doesn't want the public attention.
Yeah.
So that
he's
seems
not doing podcasts.
Well, no, he's not. That is true. And I think on purpose, he's just like, I get to stay home and paint.
He's hiding under his desk, but we just don't know where the desk is. What's the best piece of advice you've been given that you used?
Well, Seth's. Don't just tell people how you feel about it. Tell them your experience, how you experienced it.
How you experienced it, yeah. What about in your career? Any piece of advice about your career that you used? Like, I feel like you're at the top of the mountain that you decided to climb up. And was there any point along the way that someone goes, hey, stick with it because of this?
Well, the thing I would say is, first of all, it's a mountain that you created in your head, because there is no top. Right. Everybody, like, I could be working in my garage. Maybe Bill Watterson's at the top right now because he's doing exactly what he wants to be doing.
Right.
So I'm in this weird position of power or whatever you want to call where I am.
Sure.
But I think somebody told me early on, don't worry about making money. Do what you love.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would have been able to do that anyway, but I even choosing to come to Pixar, nobody knew what Pixar was.
Right, didn't exist.
I had the option to go to this lifelong dream of working at Disney or this new upstart, which was The Simpsons, and everybody was talking about. Instead, I went this other way because it just felt like the right way to go.
Why, though?
Why, exactly.
It's like, why'd you do it?
I just had a good feeling about it.
Just had a good feeling about it. The people seemed like people that you had like something in common with.
Yep. And I liked the stuff that they were doing.
What's a song that makes you cry?
What's the song of okay, hang on. September Grass by James Taylor.
Oh, what about it? You know?
There's just something I don't know, that seems it's personal, but reminds me of my wife. And it feels like a time that's passing, that like this warm, rich time that is going away. And I know that's going to happen to all of us throughout our lives, and that just feels beautiful and sad.
That's sweet. Can you remember a time in your life where you were sort of an inauthentic version of yourself?
Yeah. I mean, when I started directing on Monsters, I was trying to be John Lasseter. And a number of people kind of inadvertently fed that by saying, when this happens to John, what he does is blank and blank, which I took as, oh, I'm crappy.
Right,
and
sure.
I need to kind of do what John's doing. And I try to be big, and he's a very different personality than me.
How'd you figure out to be yourself?
Well, I just wasn't very good at being him.
Right.
So And I think
felt like it wasn't quite working, even though the movie was really successful and worked.
Well, it was along the way that started to shape of like, oh, I have to find my own version of this.
Yeah.
I can't use his.
Yeah.
Because he already thought of it. It's his thing already.
Right.
I got to do my own thing.
Did you ever have a pit stop with it where you're just like, ugh, like this hit a wall?
Well, okay, so this is weird. In the middle of that movie, directing that film, I literally lost my voice for 3 months.
Oh my God.
I could only speak about like this to people because I went to the doctor. I had a paralyzed vocal cord.
Oh gosh.
And as we talked about at the beginning, the only thing a director does is go around and talk to people. So I was basically hobbled. Wow. I could not do the job. And I think it was just weird how, like, if you were writing a script, you'd put that in and be like, that's too obvious.
It's a little on the nose, a metaphor.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was part of what led you to becoming yourself.
I think it is. I think it was part of figuring out what, not only my voice as a filmmaker, but like as a leader.
Yeah.
People, how do you deal with that?
Wow. Do you have a memory on a loop from your childhood that comes back?
Ooh, that's a good question. There's a weird, okay, so as many people did, we made a tribute film to Star Wars on Super 8 millimeter.
Okay.
Did you do that?
No.
Okay. A lot of, if you talk to people at work, Pete. There's a lot of fan films made.
Of course.
And there was one moment that we had a friend of ours, she was dressed in a Darth Vader outfit, and we had buckets of dry ice obtained at great expense.
Oh my gosh.
And we put them in the garage, and the garage opened and dry ice came out, and there came Darth Vader, and it was so cool. Of course, it looked, you can see the bowls that are holding the water as the thing.
Do you still have that footage?
I think so, yeah.
That's cool.
But that, for whatever reason, maybe because we're also moving my mom out of the house, that garage door kind of has been playing in my head. We were so anxious to shoot it, I didn't even set up a tripod. I was like, all right, go! And then just filming handheld.
It must be crazy for you because George Lucas was a part of Pixar in some way, shape, or form when it started, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that must be crazy if your childhood thing was making Star Wars, like reenactments. Crazy. Like what? Did you ever have an interesting interaction with him?
Yeah, we had to screen. So Monsters came out at the same time as one of the newer Star Wars films that he was directing. I don't remember the names of them all now, but we had to screen. We wanted to put his trailer on the front of Monsters, and so we screened the film for him early on. So it was me and John and George Lucas, and I think that's about it. Sitting there watching this movie that I directed, and I was like, "Oh, this is so weird," but he liked it.
Can you think of a scene or a moment in your life that you realize in retrospect changed your life?
Well, this isn't a specific scene, but I remember being so pissed off. So my parents were both musicians, conductors. My mom directed children's choirs, my dad at a college. And so we were always going to concerts, classical music. And it was so boring. And I remember being so pissed that I was there, and I was sort of squirming around. And my mom said, "Sit still." She kind of smacked my leg. And I was not knowing what else to do. I grabbed all the programs and just started drawing on them. And I do think between that and church, just wanting to entertain myself at times that felt boring, that's what got me into this.
The final thing we do is working out for a cause. Is there a nonprofit that you like to support? We will contribute to them and then link to them in the show notes.
Ooh. Yeah. International Justice Mission, IJM, is another one that does great work. And it was one that sort of like, wait, what? They send lawyers to different parts of the world. And I'm like, lawyers? And then you realize, they're actually cutting down by like 70% child trafficking.
Wow.
And abuse of women, just because a lot of countries are not doing anything about it.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, we will contribute to them. We will link to them in the show notes. And Pete Docter, I've been talking to you about coming on this podcast for many years. One of my favorite filmmakers of all time. It's such an honor to speak with you.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here.